it's been eating at me all day. A step 11 workshop. Having me talk about spiritual growth in Alcoholics Anonymous is like putting a hat on a pig. It's like, but I want to make it very clear. I love Alcoholics Anonymous, and I am never closer to God, the God of my understanding, when I'm with another alcoholic, ever. And if I don't say anything at all, and if the purpose of this workshop is to sort of just sort of inflame and light up people or encourage people to sort of move toward what this thing is really about. It's about spending time together. It's about for the purpose of recovery. God has never let me down in that endeavor. I don't know if God has ever let me down at all. There's been times where I thought he has, but I have never thought that God has ever let me down in that endeavor. That's one of the things that has always been obvious to me, is that God is very present in AA. My name's Marty. I'm an alcoholic. I'm a member of the Prince George group. I'm so happy to be here. I want to thank everybody for the fellowship before the meeting. Some good friends on here, some people that I love dearly, some people that I've gone into the trenches with. Very grateful to be with you. Some people that I want to get to know. I'm going to go up and stay at Jane's farm for a week. She invited me, if you guys didn't hear it, just before the meeting. So you all are witnesses that when I show up at her house, it's not like I'm a stalker or a stranger. I'm not going to go there. I'm going to eat buffalo, apparently. And, oh, hey, I think I know exactly where your ranch is now that you mentioned it. It's just outside of town. I know exactly where it is. That's your place. Oh, I drove by there many times. I didn't know there was a piss tank living right in there. I had no idea. Imagine that. We're all over the place. We're all over the place. So, but and when Ali asks, I listen. Ali is fast making himself a very what's the right word? Obvious man in Alcoholics Anonymous in these past few years. And I want to say to anybody else here on the screen too, don't be unobvious in Alcoholics Anonymous. People need to know who you are. They need to know your name. They need to know your face. That's how we really are connected. Be obvious. And Ali has become one of those obvious guys, and anybody will attest to it. Like, I've got friends all over the place who know who Ali is. And I've had the opportunity to hear him share a couple of times. And I got to tell you, he's down in my group, and everybody told me, man, this guy's awesome. So I listened to a couple of his talks. And Ali, thank you for the message you carry. Your co-host Teresa, her and I shared down in Philly at the Liberty Bell, and we spent some time later that night talking to some young gals who were just trying to get this thing. And I watched her at work, and it never ceases to amaze me that you can be here for that long and be that involved and that knee deep, and it never gets old. And what lights us up? The community. What lights us up? The connection, the kinship. What lights us up is that power. And what gives us power is, I believe, one another. To be asked to come here and talk 40 minutes, it was funny because, Ali said, what you do is you go into the big book, the format, you go into the big book or the 12 and 12, you find a concept, an idea, a word, a phrase, something like that you can talk on for roughly an hour. And I thought, how the hell am I ever going to talk on one word for an hour? Imagine that, Jill. Leslie said, that won't be a problem at all. Are you shitting me? That won't be a problem at all. So anyway, I looked and I looked at your screen, and I went through I listened to a few of the talks. I listened to Teresa, then I went through and I wanted to understand where we were going here. And I looked at some of the things people have been talking about. And what I was starting to think about was about what drew me to this was about the attitude. Now, the attitude in recovery. It wasn't that I had a bad attitude when I was a kid. I come from an Irish Catholic alcoholic home from the Ottawa Valley, where we drank and we fought and we forgave and we fought again. The home was full of violence and abuse and blood and police and playing cards and dancing and singing and fiddles, and it was a shit stomping good time all the time. The thing about it is, when I was growing up in that family, and when I first came to AA, I thought it was awful. I thought it was terrible. I thought I was the poster boy for the Children's Aid Society. I met Sandy Beach for dinner a few years back, and Sandy and I were sitting talking. He says, Marty, the older I get, the better my childhood was. And I had to sit there and think about it for a second. And if this is, like Clancy says, truly a disease of perception, then the recovery, the solution, must be actually a solution of new perceptions or different perceptions. My perceptions have changed. When these people, these stalwarts, these geniuses say to me, you can't change the past. It's impossible to change the past. I say that is completely untrue. What I thought happened never happened. And what I thought never happened, happened a lot. That's the way it was my whole life until I got here to Alcoholics Anonymous and a long time after. My story in Alcoholics Anonymous is what I was like, what happened, then what happened, and what I'm like today. And to be really frank about what happened is I was an alcoholic. I took a drink. I couldn't stop when I started. It never, ever went any other way than that. One demanded two, two demanded four, four demanded eight, and I needed that 12th drink way more than I ever needed the first drink. That was always the way it was. And that's a bad problem to have. The answer to that problem, the answer is don't take the first drink. That's the answer to that problem. Don't take the first drink. But the difficulty I suffered from this, unalcoholed, untreated, I became restless, irritable, and discontent, to put it mildly. Inside of me, I became completely filled with shame and difficulty understanding the world and thinking that I was always just $1 late and a day short. I always thought that it was like I could never sort of feel like it's not that I felt different or anything like that. I'm fishing, I'm running around the Ottawa River and camping on islands and drinking and fighting, and I'm doing everything all the other kids play hockey, and I'm doing everything. You look at me, I mean, all the kids were the same. If we were banged up in the house, we were all the same. There was no difference. But inside, I knew that there was something very different going on, and it wasn't that I didn't feel I belonged, because I did belong. I just felt like if you ever found out that I didn't belong, you'd throw me away or something like that. I think it was more something like that. Alcohol fixed that. So my perceptions changed at a really young age, and I knew that I could live in that world very comfortably. I could drink and I could be okay. The ramifications of the drinking took me through jails and to prisons, and it's a big part of my story only because that's where I met you. It's a big part of my story only because you kept coming to me. I didn't come to AA, you kept coming to me. On July the 16th, 1987, after years of trying this not drinking thing and never really trying AAs, but you guys kept coming to carry the message to me and other things. Some other time, you were involved in my life. There was no doubt about it. I'd even come to know a few years because I was in there for quite some time. So I even got to recognize a few years. But what happened was on July the 16th, 1987, in a jail cell in the Barton Street Jail here in Hamilton, I was so defeated, so crushed, so empty, so full of loathing and self-hatred and rage that I dropped to my knees, pounded on the floor, and screamed out, I don't want to live like this. I don't want to live like this anymore. And that was July the 16th, 1987. That is my dry date. I heard a voice say, you don't have to. You don't have to live like this anymore. And I was free. I was free like Bill Wilson and Marty Mann and 7 other people in the back of the big book talk specifically about feeling the power and the presence of God immediately. I had a certain set of belief systems and ideas 30 seconds before that, and 30 seconds after that, they were gone, gone, hardly to ever return. I've never thought about drinking ever since that, not even thought about it, not the obsession. I've never even thought about it. That's never even coming back. It's not there. It's just not there. There's other defects, character and shit that showed up here and there, like I get, as you can see, I get pretty animated and I'm pretty animated. That's the word I like to use these days. The mild word for I'm still crazy as shit, right? But I like I said earlier, I revel in my defects. I revel in my weaknesses. I revel in that stuff because they'll be gone one day, I suppose. I'm going to like them while they're here. So the bottom line is that I growing up in this Irish Catholic home, I had an idea about religion and religiosity. I had an idea about God through school and through the Bible. I had an idea of pictures where Jonah was in the belly of the beast for years, and he was at a desk and he was writing with a feather pen. And I remember thinking when I was old enough to conceptualize about that, what a bunch of horse shit. How could you be in the stomach of a whale writing a letter? God, what's wrong with these people? How could you believe that? And I had no idea about metaphors as a young kid, but I got to tell you, even as my intellect sort of grew around that sort of feeling never went away, that this information was skewed somehow. And I remember hearing about a loving, caring God and seeing Christ on the cross with a head full of thorns and bleeding. And I remember feeling, and man, And when Sandy said it, I remember feeling it, being so small in that church and thinking, man, he's going to kick the shit out of me when he gets a hold of me. Like the stuff I do, that's what he did to his only son he loves. That's what Sandy was saying to it. I'm in big trouble here. And the thing is that here's the interesting thing is that my sister, who was sitting right beside me still to this day, is a devout Catholic and really respects and honors the church in many ways that I was never able to conceive of. But she was having a whole different experience there when we were kids. She felt the love and the grace of God. I thought, oh man, I'm dead. I'm in trouble. And I did everything I could to hide. I would be in the hole in prison and I would have fire retardant pajamas and a Bible. And if you've ever been in the hole, that's really all you got. And I would read the Bible. And again, I would read it to intellectualize around it to find its falsehoods. My religious experience was exactly that forever. I turned away from it. Now here, and I think it was Sarah that read it. I just want to talk about this first of all. On page 50, this is the diversity of Alcoholics Anonymous, which is amazing. It says, in our personal stories, you're going to find a wide variety in the way each teller approaches and conceives of the power which is greater than himself. So I have these deep and profound misconceptions about this power. It's a deep and profound attitude in life. My father and the message that I got was don't talk, don't trust, don't feel. That is not spiritual living. Now, my dad doesn't know that because he's lived that way his whole life. He doesn't know that. He's never been challenged. He wasn't brought to his knees. But I'm living by that, even in sobriety, for 14 years in sobriety. I stopped drinking on July the 16th, 1987, but until I met Mark Houston and took steps 2 through 11, I had never had an Alcoholics Anonymous experience. I've been in AA doing every single job. I did this a lot. I spoke around all over the place, but it was all horseshit. It was all war stories. And at one time I spoke for 2.5 hours at an anniversary meeting in Ancaster. And I mean, I probably copped to about 20 crimes from the front of the room that weren't even known about. Some of them I even made up, so the investigation took place and I'm still here with you today. So it all works out in the end. But what I want to just touch on here is when I was asked to pick a topic, okay, the topic is that, and you guys have worked all around it for the last several weeks. Some of you just come here a lot. So it's right after it introduced it in the big book, page 85. It says, we're going to suggest prayer and meditation, and we shouldn't be shy in this matter of prayer. You even talked about that. Better men than us are using it constantly. Then it says it works if we have the proper attitude and work at it. I wonder if you're reading your book, and it's really only 164 pages of concern with respect to the specific directions around Alcoholics Anonymous. But if you're reading your book the way I'm reading the book, if I go back to page 63, now I've had this experience in a jail cell where I've been beaten into submission. I have no alternative but to accept spiritual help or die an alcoholic death. Those are my options. I don't know which one is going to hurt more. I know which one's going to be quicker, but that's about all the information I have. And it's not that I've turned my back so bad against religiosity. It's just I could never understand it. And again, just like my friendships and just like my family, I just felt that if God ever knew, if he's going to find out what I've been up to, I'm in big trouble, can't do it. And that was it. These are the old ideas that I was bound with in sobriety. We get to step 3, Mark and I in the hotel room, and Mark asked me some questions about, and we discussed the nature of my selfishness and self-centeredness and how it showed up in my life. And then we get to this place in our book where it says, hang on, stay with me here, is that when we're moving towards this proposition about a life-changing deal, like I asked, I'm asked the question in step 2, do you now believe, or are you willing to believe? And I said, I'm absolutely willing to believe. And the second and the hardest and the most prophetic proposition in my life today is the second part of that is God is either everything or else he is nothing. What's your choice, man? And I said, I got to do this. I need this. I must have this. Now, you got to remember, I'm a desperate alcoholic at 14 years sober. I know that there's more to this, and I haven't had it. I know that I have not had it. I was called on it. I was put on my knees in this hotel room with this guy, and he says, the first piece, the first requirement, the first thing is you got to quit playing God. You got to quit playing God. And he told me what areas of myself were in jeopardy, and he said, it's because in those areas you're playing God. You've given up some things, but you haven't given up the things that you're struggling with. Your life was never intended to be a struggle. And my attitude was, and I was getting some of these things for 14 years of sobriety, from sponsorship, don't drink and help people. And somehow in that, there was some reward in that. There was some glorification of that. There was no steps 2 through 11. I was living a life built on self. I went back to school. I got a job. I got a car. The car, I said this the other day, the car had the same plate on the front as it did in the back. I mean, there was miracles happening. There was no more newspaper stories. My family were talking to me again. So everybody was, oh man, this guy's changed. I wasn't changing shit. What we're really talking about here when we're talking about an 11-step experience is about deep and prophetic, profound change. We're not talking about, some things falling, because inside I was still restless, irritable, and discontent. God had, but with his grace, had removed the desire and the obsession to drink to the point where I just went through life experiencing all of the agony and pain as an untreated alcoholic would experience. But I also started to experience some little joys and happinesses. I had my little girl. I had a partnership with, she had 4 daughters, and then we were involved, or 3 daughters, and we were involved in this family together in this life. And I had a good life. There's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it. But I didn't have the life he intended for me. When it talks about a proper attitude, that's a descriptor, that word proper. I have an attitude, but I don't have the proper attitude that they're talking about here. It says, first of all, we had to quit playing God. Why? Because it doesn't work. It doesn't work. I kept running up against problem after problem after problem. Then you move over to go through this process, steps 3 through 11, and you go over to here and it says, okay, now we're going to talk about step 11, about prayer and meditation. It works. So playing God doesn't work. Prayer and meditation, it works. Playing God doesn't work. Prayer and meditation does work. That's, you guys can see that, right? You see how thick that says, oh shit, what did I just do? Oh, hold on. I just pressed some keys here. If I freeze up, I'll be right back. Don't leave me. But if I hold that up, you see right there, I don't even know how to count. It's like 25 pages or something like that. It's very thin reading. It's like one trip to the toilet or a quick bath. That's how much reading it is. But it says on 62, it didn't work, playing God. And on page 86, it says it works if we have the proper attitude and work at it. Now, how many people have seen or paid attention to how many times attitude is mentioned in our literature, in our beautiful literature? The 12 and 12 is rife with it. I'm not going to talk about the 12 and 12 tonight. I'm going to talk about exactly what Sarah read. It talks about an attitude of belligerent, I think it's belligerent denial, right? And here's the problem with that, is that in a guy like me, in Alcoholics Anonymous, who loves AA, and I go to meetings all the time, and I'm sponsoring a stable of guys and all that kind of stuff, and I haven't had a drink in a long time, and each day is mounting to weeks and weeks or months or years, and I'm getting pins and medallions and cakes, and people want to take me out for dinner, and it's all kinds of beautiful, beautiful stuff happening. I'm a sober dude in AA. Everybody in Southern Ontario knows I'm sober, and I'm sending guys to me all the time. I work in the business, and it's like, this is going on and on and on in my life, right? The sobriety is the biggest part of my life. There's a picture of Sandy right there. Keep him right in front of the 12 and 12. Sandy was one of my most solid sort of connections in Alcoholics Anonymous. Where it says here, where did you see it, Sarah? It talks about
page 568.
Yeah, so he can only be defeated. He can only be defeated by an attitude of intolerance or belligerent denial. So it works unless this is going on. And we just came out of step 10 where it says we have a code. Staying sober isn't even our code. Being nice to each other isn't even our code. Saving money isn't our code. Spending money isn't our code. Dating and finding partnership isn't our code. Open meetings isn't our code. Zooming meetings isn't our code. We only got one code. Love and tolerance is our code. It says, by an attitude of intolerance or belligerent denial, I will suffer and I will wither, and I will die a spiritual death. And there are many ways to die a spiritual death in Alcoholics Anonymous. This just happens to be 2 of the biggest ones: intolerance and belligerence. And what belligerence has come to mean to me is it's about spiritual pride. I'm sober 33 years, so I start thinking to myself that I know shit. I start thinking to myself that I've developed a relationship with this God that goes beyond anything that you could possibly conceive of. And, just ask. I'll loan you my deep. I got a multitude of spirituality. I got a well full. I'll loan you mine. You know what? I got the same spiritual power today that I had yesterday. And if I do the things tomorrow that I did today, I will have the same. Now, we talk about improving our conscious contact, but when we talk about growing in effectiveness and usefulness, but our level of spirituality is actually conducive to our willingness. It says it works. Belligerent denial is just an attitude of thinking that I know stuff. It's an attitude that that doesn't exist, or that doesn't happen, or that's not the way it is. Or, you know, I still to this day can see, you know, like, and I'll be frank here. You know, we had a beautiful talk, one of the best AA talks I've ever heard a couple of weeks ago by Don Major, and on the Thursday night, and it was, I wanted to have slippers on and be at his feet and just sit at his feet and listen to every word he was saying. And I'm thinking to myself, nobody's that spiritual. That's what creeps in when I hear a beautiful, powerful message like that, and I'm just reveling in it, and it's connecting to my soul. That's the dialogue that the ego comes up with. Nobody could be that spiritual. Well, you know what? I believe he is, and I want what he has. So I can move towards it. I can grow towards it as long as it's not belligerent denial. And that's what belligerent denial sounds like when my ego straps itself to. It sounds like language like that. Nobody could be that spiritual. When we look back to it, I just want to cover a couple of things here that I was thinking about today, because we don't have the market cornered on this stuff. In fact, I'm glad we don't, because we'd have to call it something. And what I think is really, really powerful is this: when many hundreds of people are able to say that the consciousness of the presence of God today is the most important factor of their lives, they present a powerful reason why one should have faith. And if our job here is to inspire you, I'm here to tell you is that God is today the most important factor of my life. Alcoholics Anonymous and priorities, my priorities go like this, and I've shared this before: is Alcoholics Anonymous, then God, and then my child, Amanda, and then my other children, and then my wife, and then the San Jose Sharks, and then musky fishing, and somewhere way down there's work and stuff. But up here is where my life exists. And I am never, said it earlier, I'm never closer to God than when I'm with you. I can pray and I can meditate and I can do all of these things. I was thinking earlier today about my prayer life. Again, the earnestness of my prayer is never more demonstrative, more powerfully felt, or more powerfully experienced than when I'm actually praying before fifth step. And I can label it. I can point to it right now, and I can go back. I've heard a lot of fifth steps in my time. And when I sit down and do a fifth step with a guy and ask God to come into the room, I feel the power and the presence of that God, like that. And I know that when alcoholic gets together with another alcoholic for the purpose of recovery, God shows up. And this thing about this relationship with God, He's never let me down. He just never lets me down. You know, and I listened yesterday to, now when we talk about this, the proper attitude around it is, what am I supposed to do? Well, I read on. It says, find out where religious people were right. And I've done that. And I began to do that a lot more. I read books. It says, find some books, find some spiritual books, read some books. In fact, I'm in an accountability group right now, Steel on Steel, with 3 other guys. And I've been doing this for a long time. And this process. And one of the guys said to me, he says, hey man, have you ever thought about like stopping reading spiritual books for a little while? Because I read a lot of spiritual books. Have you thought about stopping? And I said, why? He says, because it all seems to be in your head. Now, if you're in Steel on Steel, or if you know anything about Steel on Steel, these are considerations that I'm not allowed to rebut. This is my sponsee, the little mouthpiece, giving me shit about something, you know what I mean? And I'm sitting there and it bubbles up inside me, and the ego starts to defend itself and all that kind of stuff. And what he was saying to me was, you know, what I see and hear, Marty, is what you know about spirituality. Why don't you just sort of put it aside for a while? And I did. I had a relapse. I'm reading Mark's self-transformation book right now. And one night I had a relapse. I was looking around for something to read, and I was too lazy to go get another book. So I grabbed that book and I read a couple of paragraphs in it. And I had to admit that in my Steel on Steel that I slipped and read some spiritual stuff. But the idea is to grow in effectiveness and usefulness. The idea is to take direction. The idea is to find out where religious people are right, to read spiritual books, to try my hardest to get closer to this power, to understand this power, because it says God as we understand him. And to understand this power is to understand the role. He is the father, I am the child. He is the principal, I am the agent. This is, and it says under this is where the remarkable things are going to happen. If I take that position, what does that mean? It says when we sincerely take that position, this is what our book says, when we sincerely take that position. What is the difference between when we sincerely take that position than when we have the proper attitude? It's the same terminology, it's meaning the same thing. I have to assume that position, that God is a father and I am the child. Now I get about my day. I ask for direction. I ask for guidance. I do when I retire at night, and when I get up in the morning, I do exactly what it says to do. And if you've been around for a little while like me, and people will attest to this, as you look in that book, and sometimes it can be looming. It's not. I mean, even in the book, it's minutes. But it evolves into a way of reconciling your beginning of your day and the end of your day with this power. It's a way to resolve that in the way that Marty Cosgrove lives. And I have a prayer mat beside my bed. And if I was being totally honest with you here tonight, my evening reviews are on point. On point. I missed one in probably 2 years. And that's the honest to God truth. I have missed so much mornings. It's not funny. I struggle with that. And I go to my guys and I say, I need help with this. And I pray to God to give me help with this. Now, it doesn't mean that I don't pray and I don't meditate in the morning. What it means is I absolutely never feel a connection in the morning. I'm on about my day before I remember even what was going on in the morning, what I was praying about. There's not a connection, and then I have to make sure that whatever it was that I was talking about in my review the night before is that I connect to the following day. That's a big part of my recovery. It's a big part of how this thing just stays on point for me. I really think that, I obviously about 5 years ago, I suffered a head injury. I was in a head-on collision, hit a cab, and my head hit the top of and I went out cold. Because my last bastion of rebellion is I don't wear a seatbelt because I'm tough. Whatever. You're probably all thinking, no, you're just stupid. And you're right. You're actually right. So I hit my head and I go out cold. When I come to, the ambulance takes me out of the car and all that kind of stuff. And well, I have this head injury, but it hit me on this spot where I don't remember anything. And I got to tell you, I'm pretty free. I suggest it for everybody. I don't remember a whole lot. I don't stick to anything. Nothing sticks to me. One of my colleagues at work was saying that to me today. And what I was saying to him was I was talking to him about anonymity. And when it talks about an attitude, my attitude around anonymity is that I walk into each day with a new opportunity to be of use, to be of service. That's the attitude that I take into my day. And how can I go wrong? How can I sort of be off the mark with that? The information comes, the experiences come. I don't sit around and wait for it. I got things to do. I have to go to work. I've got a life to live. I've got children. I've got stuff to do. I got to get in my car and drive to my work. And I love my career. I love my work. I highly recommend that. If you're sober, find something you love doing, because if you're spending 8 or 10 hours doing shit you don't like, that's awful. I love what I do. And and when it goes into the 11th step around how we live in our daytime, we pray all through the day, and we get to a place, and what used to be a hunch, and all of that kind of stuff is we pause when doubtful or agitated. When it comes up, we just pause. And what is that? What is that? In that moment, I say, God, help me. Or, God, make this clear to me. Or God, help me to be of service here. It's a pause. It's like that. I get off the beam, I get right back on it. When I was 20 years sober, I get off the beam and do. Then I'd get back on it. When I was 25 years sober, I'd get off the beam and do, back on it. Now I get off the beam, bang, I'm back on it. And I'm hoping that, there isn't even enough time there. There's not even enough time in between that clap, that when shit happens, I get back on the beam. And I talk about it in my 10th step work that I do with people. And when I'm asked to do this kind of thing around the 10th step, this is a practical way of living. This is not a theory. It's a practical way of living. You can only see it you can observe it. If you've been in Alcoholics Anonymous 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, and life has gone very, very well for you, you can observe it in others. Watch me as my middle daughter hangs herself in her basement apartment. Watch me as I get the news a few weeks ago that my oldest daughter, or a couple months ago, that my oldest daughter has a brain tumor. Watch me in 10 and 11. Watch how this stuff really works. Don't sit here and think that Ali or Teresa or anybody else on here, myself, that we're talking about this stuff because we got a theoretical understanding of this stuff. This is stuff that this shit really works. It's how this started. It works. It really does. We're not, you go back and it says, me playing God doesn't work. This shit, it works. It really does. Under all circumstances. This isn't about staying sober anymore. This is about staying on the beam. This is about staying connected. And the only way that I can stay connected is if I have a right understanding of the role that it is that I'm supposed to play. If I have the right attitude. I mean, I did that thing, I sometimes do when I do workshops. I punch in a word into the a big book index because I want to sound really smart here and quote page numbers and all that shit. But all that stuff right there, that's how many times and where attitude is mentioned. That's where it's mentioned in the book. It says, just I'll talk to you about this one is only because this is the step 2 piece. And step 2 and 11 are intrinsically connected for me. They don't exist. One doesn't exist without the other. I have a closed mind and no understanding of this power. I don't even know that I need this power before I enter into step 2. In step 11, I'm constantly connecting to this power and finding ways of greater connection to improve a conscious connection. I'm trying constantly to be in contact with this power. It says, they flatly declare that since they have come to believe in a power greater than themselves, to take a certain attitude toward that power and to do certain simple things, which I believe are the steps, there's been a revolutionary change in the way of living and thinking. It's not like I can go back and say, God, I'm so grateful for all you've done. But I can certainly, because I do that, but I can certainly say to you guys, I am so grateful for all you have done. What you guys have done for me in the last 33 years, in the last 3 years, in the last couple of years with my daughter Sarah and my daughter Dana, and then life circumstances that have come about my way, I have nothing without you. I know that God set me free on July the 16th, 1987, but he set me on a course. He set me on a course to learn and to experience and to feel and emote. And I love life. I am full of joie de vivre. I really dig life. Bad shit happens to me all the time. And I say, bring it on, man, bring it on. I don't know why. And I don't think there's anything else. Like, just so you know, I want to clarify, my daughter Sarah did live. She was actually here today and she struggles big time. She's still out there. She's on the street. She's hurting. And she's playing roulette right now. As you know, it's pretty bad over in the streets here. We've lost a lot of people. And but what I do know is that single-handedly and undeniably, developing this relationship with this power, a power that I call God, and that I go to often, that I went to right before this meeting started. And I dropped to my knees and I said, just be there so that I'm not. Let me be clear about my love for you and my relationship with you, so that somebody here who's battling this thing, and I got to tell you, and no offense to anybody who likes who dishes out Bibles and stuff, it might strike you as like bullshit, but I'm not jumping for Jesus. I'm not out there selling Bibles and shit. I'm not on fire in that. I'm on fire for Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm on fire for this relationship with God. And I don't put anybody down who's on fire. I'll tell you one quick story, and when it talks about the proper attitude. So, and some of my sponsees have been here when it's happened, but I got the guys, the Mormons and the guys like that who come to my house all the time, right? And it's because they're sending new elders and stuff. So there are always new guys coming into the neighborhood. I've been in the same place for almost 27 years. They come, they knock on my door, and I say, hey, come on in. And they go, pardon? I said, yeah, come on in, buddy. They're used to having the door slammed in their face. They come on in, and we sit down, and, oh, you want a coffee? You don't drink coffee? You want water? Sure, have some water. And they open up, and they ask me a couple questions, and boom, I tell them about you guys. I tell them about AA. I tell them about this stuff I'm talking to you right now. And they're sitting there with their jaws on the floor. They leave me their Bible, the Book of Mormon, and they'd give me some things to read. And they say, we'll come back in a couple of weeks and talk to you. Well, they come back in a couple of weeks and like, I'll keep them there for 4 hours and bore the shit out of them. I mean, they're going to sleep. Their eyes are glazing over. It's like, okay, we got to go. Yeah, we'll see you later, man. My wife and my kids are running for they're hiding and stuff like that. No. It's like, come on in, and it's not about, that's not just, I'll tell you why that happens for me. My group is at the Salvation Army Citadel at the corner of Upper Gage and Stone Church in Hamilton. And that Stone Church Road is a long 2-lane sort of, in the winter, it glistens. It has, like when it's snowing, there's sleet coming down and it's slick. And it has it's got the street lights, and when there's rain pouring and stuff, almost invariably, because the kingdom, a couple of them actually are right in between my group and these churches. I will see these gentlemen, these young men out there with their white collar shirts, their ties on, their knapsacks, knocking on doors that they know are going to be slammed in their face. They know they're going to be slammed in their face. And I just sometimes pull over and say hello. And I'll sit there and my heart will just lift up because they believe. And I want what they have. I want what they have. They have the proper attitude. They have the proper attitude about the God of their understanding. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. I go through life and I look and I try to see these things and I'm awake to it. That's when Mark met me outside of that when he met me outside of that hotel room that time at the conference, and he said, son, you're asleep dreaming you're awake. I had not had an awakening. I was 14 years in AA. I had not had an awakening. Now I've had an awakening. and I know where the glory goes. And I want to thank you so much, guys, for listening just to that part there about what it is that we're supposed to be talking about the proper attitude towards this power. I want to thank you for listening.